We're at it again, and today we're looking at staffing shortages by industry in cybersecurity. And you may be thinking to yourself, why in the world do I care where the staffing shortages are lying? How is this going to help me find that entry-level role? After all, I probably don't care where I get that cybersecurity job. I just want a job in cybersecurity. And I hear you loud and clear, but I think it's important to have this knowledge to understand what this chart means and how it can affect our job search to land that first entry-level position within cybersecurity, or even further than that, how to expand into our next role within cybersecurity. And let me explain. But before I do, I want to point out, thank you, StationX, for providing this great chart. It was off their website. I like to give credit where credit's due. And they published this on one of their web sites. I'll publish that in the link below to kind of give you some more insights. So let's tackle this, right? Right off the bat, we see education at 78%. We see government and non-military at 78%. This is one I would take with a little bit of a tweak in mind because this is an older chart. And then we have nonprofit, 76%, military contractor. But what does it all mean? What does it mean when I'm looking for this job? Well, it aligns to the fact that, first off, we see that education, we see nonprofit, we see aerospace and healthcare, whatever industry we're looking at, that these are positions where they have a shortage in cybersecurity. There's a shortage within this industry. And so right off the bat, we know that, hey, maybe I should start looking at educational job sites, right? Now, you may be thinking to yourself, wait a second, I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be a professor. I want to do cybersecurity. I want to actually do it, not teach it. And that's fine. Education has many different evolving aspects to it. The IT infrastructure behind it. We have to safeguard student information. We have to safeguard the industry, or the hardware behind it. And believe it or not, just like any other field, education has need for cybersecurity that isn't teaching it as well. And so we can look at this and go, hey, maybe I should go off and look at educational websites that are looking specifically to hire people in the education sector where somewhere I didn't go before. And so that's a real buy-in that we can maneuver our job search into places that maybe other people aren't looking. Most people are looking on LinkedIn. They're doing Indeed. They're doing Monster or whatever else job site. And these are broad scope, hey, help wanted websites. But in some cases, if I can zero in on these educational help wanted sites that cater to that education industry, I might be able to find some positions that other people aren't looking at, which means there's not as many fish in the pond, which means it's a higher likelihood I may get an interview. My interview may make it past the AI overlords, right? And so we need to look at that. Same with military contracting websites, like there's clearancejobs.gov or .com. There's a couple other websites that are out there that cater towards contracting for military positions. And these may have an aspect that you could kind of maneuver into for cybersecurity. Look at healthcare and automotive. There are websites that cater to these fields and that we should look at. All right, so what about moving past this? Other than just the websites, how can I utilize this information to upskill my resume to get me in through the front gates? Because that's really what we're looking for when we're talking about resumes. Well, one of the biggest things that we can do is highlight those skill sets within that particular industry. What did we do that aligns with that industry? Do we have a degree? Now, most people will be thinking, okay, wait a second, I need a degree to work in education. Well, yeah, actually, most education industries are going to require a degree because they want somebody that's educated. They want people that are going through it. You're less likely to get a job without a bachelor's degree if you're working in the education sector, because there is this culture around the education sector that says you need to have a bachelor's degree. Is that 100% the case? No. You can find positions within the education sector that maybe aren't higher ed or high school that maybe like, it's okay as long as you understand and have an associate's degree or have some knowledge about it, and they're not as picky. But for the most part, if you work in the education sector, it's almost like I have to have a bachelor's degree. It's almost a requirement that's unwritten within there. Now, what about nonprofits? Well, do you have volunteer work on your resume? Nonprofits like to see that you've done stuff with nonprofits. They like to have that background and experience that says, I'm not in it for the money, because a lot of nonprofits, they're not going to pay as well. And even if they do pay well, a lot of times they want you to know that, hey, this is the mission. The mission comes first. It's the culture associated with it. So let's talk about culture for a second, okay? A lot of government military positions, a lot of government positions, if you're looking at a veteran versus non-military veteran, right, somebody that didn't serve, and I'm hiring for a position that works with DoD, whether it's a contractor or within that field, 9 times out of 10, if all things are equal and I have a veteran versus a non-veteran, I'm picking the veteran every single time. They understand the culture. They understand the workflow. They understand the identity of working in that field. And so we can utilize that knowledge to maneuver ourselves into the next position, whether it's healthcare, automotive, energy, insurance, it doesn't matter. A lot of people that are going into cybersecurity have transferred in from another field. And if you're a brand new college student, you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't have any background. I don't have any experience in other fields. How do I do that? Well, most college students work a part-time job. Most college students intern, or they provide some volunteer work for different organizations. Utilize that volunteer work. Utilize that part-time job to maneuver your resume into that industry. And if you're a college student or somebody that doesn't have a background, maybe you can look at this and go, okay, if I am going to volunteer, maybe I should volunteer more on the education side, or maybe on the government side, maybe more towards the military. Or we can look at our internship opportunities and try to cater our resume towards those. When the very top of our resume, we have a summary section. And I see this mistake all the time when I'm looking at resumes. If you're a transfer, you're not in cybersecurity right now, or you're a brand new college student, they provide this summary and it's very bland. It's like, oh, I want to be this, or I want to do this, or I want to do this. And it's very bland. It doesn't really connect the dots. Your summary is there to connect those dots. If you're transferring from another field, maybe you worked in healthcare. I'll pick on healthcare for a minute, right? Let's say that you were a pharmacy technician, or maybe something else that worked in healthcare. You have this perfect opportunity because you've worked in that field. You can align HIPAA. You can align these healthcare culture into cybersecurity, and that summary is the perfect place to do it. And you can provide that summary and say, well, I've worked in this field. I have experience in healthcare. I'm also experienced and educated in cybersecurity. I've done this with cybersecurity, and I really want to form the two together to work in cybersecurity and healthcare. And that's going to put you above people that don't understand healthcare, right? Have you ever been to a doctor's office before and you hear a nurse and a doctor talking at the same time? They have their own language, their own lingo, their own culture associated with healthcare. I've never worked in healthcare. And so if I was trying to get a job in healthcare versus somebody that's already worked in healthcare before, chances are they're going to get the position because they understand the culture, they understand the lingo. Understand that past experience, regardless of where it is, regardless if it's in cybersecurity or not, does matter. And we want to use those skills that we've learned in those past positions, that experience, to highlight our resume into this field of study, into this field where we're going to perform cybersecurity. A lot of times when we look at those specific sets, we also understand the tools associated with it. Anybody that's ever been military or government understands that the military and the government have their own tools. They have their own programs that nobody else knows about. They have their own software that they have to be familiar with. They have their own regulations, their own procedures. All of that comes into play with that background of being in the military or in the government. So why aren't you catering that experience back into your resume, right? Remember, it's not up to the reviewer or the person that's reading your resume to highlight those connections. It's your job to highlight those connections. So if you're in automotive or healthcare, how can I really make that experience, even though it's not technically in cybersecurity, and place it front and forward facing within my resume to tell the potential employer that, hey, I've worked in this industry, I understand the culture, but I want to do that in a cybersecurity capacity. And that's your job. That's your goal when we're doing our resumes. We can further customize our resumes to fit specific industries. For instance, I'll pick on healthcare. That's an easy one. HIPAA, right? Did you take a class on HIPAA? Do you have a certification saying, hey, I understand HIPAA. I took a HIPAA law course or something like that. Can we provide that knowledge front and forward facing when it comes into it? Education's another one, right? If you understand FERPA, if you've been a high school teacher, or maybe you've worked in teaching before, you have these teaching credentials already, and now we're maneuvering that in towards cybersecurity. It's not unheard of to see teachers maneuver into cybersecurity. Matter of fact, we appreciate it, especially in the education sector, because you understand what the professors are going through. You understand what the teachers are going through, unlike somebody that's never worked in it. And so there's that culture behind it. I cannot overstate this enough, all right? If you've got a background in a specific industry, okay, regardless of where it is, you need to transfer that industry-specific knowledge into your summary, into your job field when we're catering our resume to that specific position in that industry. All right, you've got to do it. It's really going to put you ahead when people are looking at your resume, and it could mean the difference between not getting an interview and getting an interview. Have you found this video helpful so far? I would really appreciate you to hit that like, that subscribe, and of course that bell icon at the bottom. Let's get back into it. So let's talk about some of these, right? Obviously, we mentioned nonprofit, having volunteer work on the side, understanding that how volunteer organizations work, whether it's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, regardless if it's St. Vincent de Paul or Goodwill. Having that nonprofit volunteer experience will cater your resume and take it over somebody that doesn't. Same with military and contractor. But what about aerospace? Maybe you've been a pilot before. Maybe you were a stewardess. Maybe you were somebody that checked baggage, and you may be thinking to yourself, well, that's not really aerospace. Yes, it is. It is 100% aerospace. You understand how the airlines function. You understand how aircraft function. Maybe you're a mechanic. It doesn't matter. Whatever the case may be, if you've worked in aerospace, think about those specific skills, whether they're in customer service or they're specific to that industry with the software, or how the culture, how the procedures motivate you through that process of how you can use your past experience to cater towards that experience within cybersecurity. We already talked about healthcare enough. What about automotive? Whether you're a technician or somebody that's actually done this, there are specific programs of software that you utilize. If I go in and I have my tires changed, there's specific software associated with that, right? You understand, if you've worked in that field, there's specific lingo. You may understand things about a car that I will never understand, right? But you understand that industry, you understand the culture more than somebody that doesn't. Showcase that experience in your resume, especially in your summary as you're going through, and utilize that experience to showcase within your resume, especially if you're going for an automotive position, or I should say a position in automotive, right? How that experience highlights within your past experience, right? Energy and power, right? If you've ever worked for an electric company or a water company, what about ICS, right? Infrastructure control security, right? What about SCADA? What about the peculiars of these utility companies that nobody else really understands? Insurance companies. You've dealt with insurance before. You understand the insurance ins and out. You understand their software. How can we utilize a cybersecurity position to showcase that insurance background, right? And then food, beverage, hospitality, their point of sale systems, how they deal with customers and the culture associated with it. What about the regulatory requirements? What about the technology associated with it? All of that comes into play that you need to highlight front and center on your resume as you're looking at that. So what can we do with this information? What can we do with the statistics that we're seeing here? Well, these are good statistics to know because we've seen shortages within cybersecurity for these specific industries, and we can go and say, okay, if I've got a background, or maybe I had a job 2 or 3 years ago, maybe it wasn't my last job, but it was a job before that, that was in automotive, right? That had to deal with automotive. How can I highlight that specific position within my resume to showcase my understanding of that culture, to showcase my understanding of that industry? And that's going to push my resume ahead of somebody that doesn't have that experience. But it's up to us, the individual person putting that resume together, to really showcase that experience and highlight it for that person that's reviewing the resumes, to say, hey, I'm here. I understand the problems. I understand the challenges associated with working in this industry. That's why you should hire me over that other person. Now, one of the ways that we can do this, and I kind of mentioned this already, is we can list specific compliance frameworks or understanding of laws and regulations. Healthcare is an easy one. We have HIPAA, we have high trust, right? Finance, we have PDISS, we have SOX, we have GLBA. Manufacturing, kind of going in towards more that energy, power, and utilities, right? We can mention NIST 800, right? We can mention IEC. Retail and hospitality, we can mention, again, PCIDS, GDPR, right? Understand those specific frameworks that we may have an understanding of, that we can highlight on our resume, that really portray our understanding of cybersecurity and more than cybersecurity within that field that we're trying to do, right? Don't ever underestimate those transferable skills from those positions. It doesn't matter if you worked at McDonald's before. It doesn't matter if you worked as a taxi cab driver, right? There is specifics for regulations. There's specific for security and technology that you've used that you can showcase you have an understanding of when we're building out our resume. So what I'm really trying to get across as we're looking at this is we really need to understand within our resumes, right, that companies are hiring for an entry-level position and that you are competing with hundreds upon hundreds of other applications for the same job. If you can understand that, then you need to understand also that my resume needs to be built on a case-by-case basis, on a job-per-job basis. You need to understand that if I can get even a small edge over another resume, then I need to take that. So if I have a background in aerospace, I need to look at that position. You need to understand that we need to customize our resume for the specific industry that I'm trying to maneuver into. Sometimes that industry is education. Sometimes it's working at a SOC. Sometimes it's working in aerospace. Whatever that industry is, whether it's telecommunications, insurance, or transportation, it doesn't matter. We need to facilitate our resume in such a way that it showcases our understanding of that specific industry, not just cybersecurity alone. Any competitive edge I can get as an entry-level position moving into cybersecurity is going to put me ahead of all my competitors, right? 600 plus resumes for a job that posted within 3 hours. Think about that. Think about it as you're writing your resume. You cannot shortcut the resume. You can't do it. All right. All right. That's it for me today. I'm Dr. K.